G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for today's wrap up of the AFL trade and draft period for West Coast, including a couple of general observations of the state of the trade period as well. For today's coverage, I'm going to give an overview of our movements during the trade period, including my analysis of all of our trades and then what they mean for our squad next year. Also, a brief overview and look at our likely targets at the draft and who they'll be. Also, how it's likely to get done. Before finally, my key takeaway from the trade period. But before we get going, I'm going to try and make a point of putting the word out to all the new viewers of this channel and my videos to please consider hitting the subscribe button if you haven't already. I've noticed a shift in audience since the end of the AFL season and now that the trade and draft content is coming out. But for all of those who are new, I do cover weekly AFL and waffle reviews during the season, trade and draft coverage, as well as the off-season content tracking players setting up for the upcoming year, and then everything in between. So if you like to consume your West Coast updates in this format, the content is here all year round. Now let's take a look at our trade period. All in all, we brought in two players, Brandon Starcevich and Tyler Young, while essentially setting ourselves up to bring in Devon Robertson as part of all the handshakes that went on with the Starcevich deal. We also did a bit of pick movement too, just to facilitate those trades and to set us up, just to bring all the new talent that we have our eye on at the draft. I mentioned in my last video that Cal Twomey described it best by saying that by the end of that convoluted three-way trade for Starcevich, we essentially brought him in for the pick value of pick 23. But I also added, based on the clear efforts between West Coast and Brisbane, that Devon Robinson was also part of that deal. So you could easily conclude that we're actually getting both Starcevich and Robertson for pick 23, but in a way that fits those extra rookie spots that we were given by the AFL. So it's really been designed to suit us, just in case anyone's wondering, well, why wasn't he packaged up in the deal? The pick swaps in that deal improved our first rounder. That was from pick 17 to 13 before all of the match bids that are going to happen. While we ended up coming out of the overall period with a massive spread of picks beyond pick 30, which will guarantee that we match bids on any of the club-tied talent that we have going into this draft, and I'll discuss those later in this video. Out of the players we lost, Liam Ryan, Campbell Chesser, and Oscar Allen, I think 2 out of 3, we didn't really get adequate compensation for losing. Obviously, pick 2 for Oscar Allen is a great win for the club, but pick 41 for Chesser in particular was a real slap in the face to me. But at the end of the day, the only takeaway that I can take from that is that no club really has the entitlement to be fully compensated for an uncontracted player leaving. So realistically, the real objective has to be keeping them. It goes the same for Tyler Young, who we brought in, and who I think any Richmond supporter who knows him best will tell you that we made an absolute steal by bringing him in for pick 38. But yeah, between Tyler Young coming in, Starcevich coming in, and Robertson also likely to come in on that Starcevich deal, who I'm including in this calculation, I still think we came out of the equation better winners from who came in and out, and that's before we include the Oscar Allen compensation, which didn't really involve any negotiations, aside from, I suppose, Brisbane agreeing to put the right number to his name. Anyway, that brings me to my overall assessment of our performance in this trade period. From our end, I think West Coast's holistic performance was really impressive, because when I say holistic, I'm actually talking about a bit of a tightrope that we walk to meet the number of competing needs that pull against each other. It's clear that we need to bring in senior leaders who can fill the holes that we have, both in our midfield and in key defence. But given the decade of low draft picks that led up to our low period now, we even more importantly need to ensure that we don't compromise our access to top-end draft talent while we're at it. So for me, it's really important when we're measuring how West Coast performed at the trade table to really look at it through that lens. Over the last 2 years, I know a lot of people have been a bit disparaging of some of the guys we brought in because they're not A-graders. I think some people sort of look at them as leftovers, but I personally have been really impressed with how we've improved our list on a budget when it comes to draft picks that we're prepared to part with for them. And also for a team at the bottom of the ladder, we've attracted multiple free agents and bargains who actually said that they want to come to West Coast. It's also the reason that we haven't gotten any of the big fish that have been moving around the comp. Because when you take a look at the deals, they've got guys like Christian Petrarca or Charlie Curnow across the line this year. It's just not an option for us to be handing picks like the ones that were required for them over just for one star while we're in the middle of a rebuild. The guy that comes to mind when I see those deals was Chad Warner signing on with Sydney last year, just for that pretty short-term 2-year extension that will take him through to free agency. How convenient. The only negatives for me really from this trade period was losing Chesser, which I've already mentioned. And my other negative is really about hindsight, and that's our decision to take Hawthorn's first rounder over Carlton's last year. That was when Hawthorn got a bit cheeky. They split their first rounder and then made us choose between next year's first rounders that they got out of it. That one kind of found its way into my head when we traded up from pick 17 to 13 this year. I just couldn't help but think that we could have been starting from pick 9 before any player movement got underway if we got that right. Like I said, though, I'm only saying this in hindsight now, and I'm going to be completely honest. I really didn't have a strong opinion at the time last year when we were weighing up between who would be better this year, Carlton, Hawthorn. Seems obvious now, but that's because it's hindsight. I don't know who was jumping up and down last year out of everyone watching, but I just wasn't one of them. I just didn't give it too much thought. So overall, I'd give us an A minus for our trade period. It wasn't perfection across the board when you factor in what we got for our departing players. But like I said, the onus really is on retaining guys. So that minus on the A is pretty much there for not being able to hold on to Chesser rather than how we got shafted for what we got for him. Anyway, all of those trades, they're more of a review than breaking any new ground. We already know that they've happened, and it was more just my assessment of them. So I'm going to try and put in a little bit of time into what's next by covering our draft hand and who we're currently linked to or interested in, and how we're likely to bring the guys that we've been linked to in. So right at the top, starting off, our hand going into the draft is now picks 1, 2, 13, 34, 41, 53, 58, 80, and 98. That's a lot of picks, and I know that some of those later numbers sound like trash to you, but I'll explain later why the volume is just as important as those top end ones we've got at the front. But the players we're currently likely to bring in include Willem Dersma and Cooper Duff-Tytler with those first 2 picks, assuming we don't trade down, which I don't think we're going to do, but it's a possibility with Essendon. Pick 13 will slide, and I think we'd be doing really well to grab someone like Jacob Farrow with that. He's a WA midfielder, and since WA talent tends to get undervalued at the draft, I think there's a possibility that even after it going backwards, we could still get him. I know that Tom Blamiras, and I mentioned this in one of my previous videos, who was the 22-year-old midfielder who won the VFL's Best Young Player, is apparently on our radar. So it's possible we could take him with pick 34 if he's in the draft at that point. And then after that, I think you're looking at the volume of what I think people would call junk picks, which are really there to match our NGA and father-son talents, essentially, who are definitely not junk targets, by the way. At the top of our club-tied talent, and I think someone in the comments made a really good point and pushed back on this last week that Wes Wally should right be at the top 2. But I mentioned last week that Tyler Williams was top 5 in both the 20-metre sprint and the agility testing at the AFL National Draft Combine. And all the footage I've seen of him since says that his potential's really got a high ceiling. I'm comparing him a bit to Darcy Jones, but maybe just not as immediately AFL ready as Darcy Jones was. Our father-son prospect, Charlie Banfield, actually ran the 2-kilometre time trial at the WA State Combine in 6 minutes and 8 seconds, which is ridiculous. To put that in context, he would have come 4th in the National Draft Combine with that number if he'd been invited. For me personally, the 2-kilometre time trial I find is usually a measure of how ready a draftee is to step into the AFL program and all the conditioning requirements that come with it. So I think Banfield will have an immediate impact in the Waffle Eagles next year if we get him, and there's no reason why we shouldn't. Which leaves a couple more NGA prospects, Wes Wally, like I mentioned earlier, and Kobe Evans, who should also get across to West Coast, just under the radar, hopefully. And again, the addition of those 4 extra rookie list spots that we got from the AFL in the assistance package should mean that we get a chance to see those guys reach their potential in the AFL system. From what I remember, it was a 3-year timeline for those extra rookie list spots, unless the AFL changed their mind, which they shouldn't. So that should really give those guys time to develop once they're in the AFL system at West Coast. Where's Wally in particular? Where's Wally? I know everyone's already making that joke, so I don't really want to join in. He sounds like he's got a really high ceiling as a classy small forward too. Otherwise, I'm not sure where else to put him in this video, but as a side note, keep an eye out for Harry Schoenberg coming across after the national draft. If he does, then he's going to be my dark horse to have a surprisingly big impact for us next year. He was delisted by the Adelaide Crows, and he's very capable. Which pretty much covers everything West Coast Eagles for this update. So I'm actually going to finish on a broader note and give my big takeaway from this year's draft period, which is an unexpected effect that these compromised drafts have had on equalisation. I know a lot of people have said that it's harder than ever for clubs at the bottom of the ladder to rebuild, with all the top end talent who are already spoken for at the draft, and this is going to be one of those drafts. But what surprised me was that there's actually been an unexpected effect on clubs at the top of the ladder who want to bring in stars. So this draft period, we saw Geelong lost the bidding war for Charlie Curnow to Sydney, and were also unable to bring in Rowan Marshall at all with the picks that they were prepared to part with, first rounders. We also saw Hawthorn throw 3 first round picks at Zach Merritt and failed. And the key takeaway was this, that all the match bids at the top of the draft are actually making the first round picks for top 4 sides really unappealing. So aside from pick 9, that's that Carlton pick that Hawthorn got off them, all of the first round picks that Hawthorn offered for Merritt, Zach Merritt, were essentially picks in the mid-20s. And the same for Geelong, who once you get past their offer at face value, first round picks on the table, everything they were putting on the table for Curnow was in the mid-20s after you look at the guys that have got match bids. And at the end of the day, that stopped 2 top 4 teams from bringing in contracted A-graders. While in that same trade period, we saw Sydney and Gold Coast were able to land Charlie Curnow and Christian Petrarca at the same time. So it's not quite something that you can just dismiss and say, oh, well, they weren't prepared to move them. Guys moved. Big names moved. Anyway, that's my little bit of food for thought to wrap up with. Personally, I think it's really satisfying. It's a satisfying development in the trade and draft landscape for the top teams to also feel a little bit of that pain. So I thought I'd put it out there on the topic of equalisation just now that the trade period is over and they didn't go through. For me, the next stop will be some more draft-specific videos in a few weeks. So if you're subscribed to the channel, I'll hopefully see you all again then. And cheers until then.